to the Usu Castle. My name is Ken Watt, and you can just call me Ken, and I'm going to be your site guide. The castle was officially built 1661 by the Danes. The Danes arrived from Denmark in 1659. They paid 3,200 gold florins to the paramount chief of the Usu community to secure the land on which the castle is built. The Danes built the castle using just two materials, stones and lime as binding agent. The original name they gave to the castle is Christiansborg. The castle was named after King Christian the Fourth. Now, King Christian the Fourth was the king of Denmark and Norway at the time that they built the castle, so they decided to name the castle after him. The castle is 364 years. This is, however, not the oldest castle we have in Ghana. The oldest was built by the Portuguese in 1482. The Portuguese were the first Europeans to arrive. They arrived in 1471 as they were trying to locate the source of gold trade that was happening between North Africa and West Africa. The Portuguese settled at a place now known as Elmina. Elmina is from the Portuguese word lamina, which means the mines. They referred to that particular place as the mines because they could virtually pick gold from streams and lagoons surrounding where they built their castle. They built the oldest fortification in the whole of West Africa. They named it the St. George's Castle, and that's the same castle we now know as Elmina Castle. So Elmina Castle is one of three castles that we have in Ghana. It's the oldest, it's also the largest. It was built for trading. Over time, it was used for slave trade. This is the second largest castle we have in Ghana. Now, this castle was built for trading. It was used for slave trade. After independence, the same castle became the seat of government. From 6th March 1957 all the way to February 2013, 12 presidents and military rulers ruled from here. The smallest of the three castles is the Cape Coast Castle, and that happens to be the only castle built purposely for slave trade. The Danes had three reasons for building the castle. One is accommodation, two, to serve as a marketplace or a trading center, and three, to serve as storage facility for their commodities. Now, the Danes brought in commodities like guns, gunpowder, textiles, ceramics, barrels of whiskey, tobacco smoking pipes, mirrors, and iron rods. They would trade or exchange the commodities for gold and ivory from the whole of West Africa. Now, fast forward, there was an influx of sugarcane plantation in the Caribbean. The Danes needed manpower. They saw Africa as a place where they would get cheap labor. That's when they began the slave trade. Slaves were brought in from all over West Africa. They assembled and kept the slaves here for about 3 to 6 months. They wait for the ship to arrive, then transport all the slaves to the Danish West Indies, St. Thomas, St. John's, and St. Croix. Now, back then, these islands belonged to the Danes. In 1917, they sold the islands to the US, hence the name US Virgin Islands. According to the records from the Maritime Museum in Copenhagen, over 126,000 slaves were taken from this castle alone to work on sugarcane plantations in the Virgin Islands. The slave trade continued until 1803, when Denmark became the first European country to abolish the trade. Even though the Danes were the ones that built the castle, they are not the only people to have occupied it. So they built in 1661. In 1679, they lost control over the castle to the Portuguese. The Portuguese occupied it for 4 years. They were here between 1679 and 1683. So after 83, the Danes regained control over the castle. They occupied the castle until 1850, when they decided to sell it to the British. They sold this castle along with four other forts: Fort Prinsenstein in Keta, Kongenstein in Adan, Fredensborg in Ingopramprам, Augustaborg in Teshi, and the Christiansborg all belonged to the Danes. In 1850, they sold all to the British for a combined £10,000, and that's when they left the shores of the country. So from 1850 all the way to 1957, it was the British that were here. When the British took over, they had also abolished slave trade. So when the Danes abolished theirs in 1803, the British abolished in 1807. When they took over the castle, they used this as their headquarters or their seat of government. So because they were colonial masters, this was where they were ruling the country from. After independence, the castle was handed over to us. Our first president, the late Osajifo Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, decided to continue using this as the seat of government. It remained here. 12 presidents and military rulers used it. The last president was the late John Evans Fifiata Mills in 2012. The seat of government was moved from here officially, February 2013, by the current president, His Excellency John Dramani Mahama. Back then, when Atta Mills was president, his vice is the current president now. So Mahama was the vice president to the late John Evans Atta Mills. So when Atta Mills died while he was still in office, Mahama moved from vice president to become president and took the seat of government to the Jubilee House, February 2013, where it has since been. Now, as I mentioned earlier, slaves were brought in from all over West Africa. Usually, they had to walk from wherever they were captured to the castle. It took them several months of walking. By the time they arrived here, the ones that didn't make it got here either weak, sick, or injured. So once they are brought in, they parade them on the courtyard and then they strip them naked. They do this to be able to check for injuries, infections, worm infestations, etc. It makes it easy for them to sort out, to separate the healthy slaves from the unhealthy ones. Since they had to pay for the slaves, the healthy ones were more expensive. Male slaves are also more expensive as compared to female slaves. After this, they brand the slaves. To be able to brand the slaves, they put metal in fire, get it red hot. They used to make marks on the skins of the slaves, sort of tattoos, depending on the slave master you belong to. After, they take them straight into the dungeons. Because the castle was built for trading, the dungeons we have in here were built and used as storage rooms. Once the Danes started the slave trade, they saw the slaves as one of their commodities. They decided to convert these same storage rooms into dungeons to house the slaves. In total, we have 12 dungeons in this castle. As part of the tour, I'll take you to see two of the dungeons, one male dungeon and one female dungeon. We'll look at some of the activities that used to take place in there. I'll show you the reservoir that supplied the castle with water. Then take you to see the presidential staircase. From there, we'll go to the room of the late Queen Elizabeth II. I'll take you to the office of Ghana's longest serving president, the late Flight Lieutenant Jerry John Rawlings. We'll go to the St. Francis Xavier Catholic Church, the church that's ironically built on top of dungeons. We'll visit the castle garden. We will summarize and end our tour once we get to the door of no return. Welcome once again to the castle. All right, so let's go in and begin our tour from the dungeons. The initial structure was just one here, the current site was here. Over time, they made several additions. Anytime there is an addition, then you get into addition. So MCF XII represents 1912, this side was added 1921. This is one of 12 dungeons we have in the castle. So we have some of the dungeons that were reserved for male slaves, and then the rest were for female slaves. This and this were male slave dungeons. 60 male slaves were kept in here, 60 of them were kept in there. 120 slaves occupied these two dungeons all the time. The slaves relied on the window over here for air. The opening at the top was what provided them with sunlight. This used to be their only source of light. It's covered now because anytime it rains, the rain enters the dungeons. That's why we decided to cover it. Back then, it was left open so that anytime the sun comes out, it will shed a bit of light in here for the slaves. The channel over here, this is what's served as the latrine. Anytime they had to use the toilet to urinate, vomit, spit, they had to do all that in the channel over here. They would sleep right next to it. Because of how close they were to their toilets, diseases were quite common amongst them. Quite a number of them died as a result. If at any point in time, any of the slaves died in any of the dungeons, they were not even buried. The Danes would tie a cannonball to your leg, put you on a boat, sail a few meters away from shore, then dump the bodies into the sea. Once slaves are brought here, they'll be here 3 to 6 months. And that's because usually it takes a ship between 3 to 6 months to move from the Virgin Islands, where the Danes had their plantation, to get to the shores of the country to pick the next batch of slaves. You'd have to be in here waiting for the ship the whole time. The treatment and conditions were the same across all 12 dungeons. Male slaves and female slaves were all fed just once each day. They were never allowed to take their bath. All the dungeons are built the same. You come across one window, one door, one window, one source of light, and one latrine as well. After this castle became the seat of government, some of the dungeons were converted into storage rooms. This is one of the dungeons that became a storage room when the presidents were here. It's why it looks a little different. It used to be as empty as this very one as well. All right, so as I said earlier, we had males separated from females. So this is the first of 4 female slave dungeons. This is the second one. The next 2 were all female slave dungeons. Again, this is one of the dungeons that later on became a storage room when the presidents were here. It's why we have shelves in here. It used to be as empty as the first one I took you to see. 30 female slaves kept in there, 30 in here, 30 in the next two dungeons as well. Right? 30. 30. Yeah, 30. Wow. Right behind you, that's the window over there, was also supplying them with air. Then they had an opening at the top over here that was supplying them with sunlight. This time around, this wasn't covered by us to prevent rain from entering. It was covered because the Portuguese took over the castle and built a church on top of the female slave dungeons. The Saint Francis Xavier Catholic Church sits on top of all four female slave dungeons. As a result, they lost their only source of light. Because they had no other source of light at the time, most of the slaves that were kept in these dungeons ended up becoming partially blind from being in the dark for too long. You can see how dark the inner dungeon is. There is a bit of light in here because the door is open. Once the door is closed, it will be as dark as this. This is even during the day. You can imagine the conditions in here at night. The female slaves had to be in here 3 to 6 months, just like the male slaves. Within that 3 to 6 months, they are fed just once each day, just like the male slaves. They are never allowed to take their bath as well. And that's even aside the sexual abuse, physical abuse that they had to go through almost all the time as well. Dr. Carl Engman water system. It was constructed in 1753 by a Danish surgeon by name Carl Engman. Engman was brought into the castle as one of the doctors to treat slaves that were sick and injured. Now, when he came, he actually went on to become governor. He was governor between 1752 and 1757. After he became governor, he realized one of the main problems the castle had was water storage. He decided to use some of the slaves to construct this reservoir so that anytime it rains, they can harvest rainwater. So this can hold over 10,000 gallons of water. There is two of this in the castle. This is one. That's another one under the stairs over there. That's what they use for the domestic activities in the castle. And this was their only source of water. Their only source of water. The only other alternative is the sea. And because of how salt it is, they couldn't use it for anything at all. It took the slaves 10 years for them to finish constructing the reservoir. So once they are brought in here, they'll be here 3 to 6 months. They'll be working on the reservoir the whole time. As soon as the ship arrives, they take all the slaves away. They'll bring in another group. They will also have to come and continue working on it. The cycle went on and on for 10 years before they finally managed to finish this one. So, all right. So let's go see the presidential stairs. The most popular feature of the castle, and that's because when you pick the 50 cedi note, that's what you see over here. Yeah, there's the stairs. Also in the middle, that's the castle. So that's the castle in the middle. Yeah. So there is a picture of the stairs and the castle on the 50 cedi note because the highest note of the country carries a picture of the seat of government. In July 2007, when these notes were released, this 50 cedi note was the highest at the time, and this castle was the seat of government. It's why there is a picture of the stairs and the castle on it. Now the seat of government has been moved to the Jubilee House. Our highest note is the 200 cedi note. And that's why when you pick the 200 cedi note, you'll see a picture of the Jubilee House on it as well. The stairs has been divided into three. The middle part is reserved for presidents, diplomats, royals, top officials from all over the world. We have had people like Michelle Obama, Barack Obama, 2009, the late Queen Elizabeth II, 1961, Prince Charles, now King Charles, 1977. They've all used the middle side of the stairs. Other top officials have also used it. The rest had to use either the left or the right to get to the top as well. All right. So let's continue our tour upstairs. You are free to use the middle. I'm making you. Francis Xavier Catholic Church. This church was built by the Portuguese in 1679. The only addition that the Portuguese made to the castle when they took over. They occupied the castle for 4 years, 1679 to 1683. This is the same church that's ironically built on top of dungeons. While the slaves were down there suffering, the Portuguese were here praying to God. Now, the surprising thing is that this didn't just happen in the castle alone. It happened in all the castles that we have in Ghana. When you go to Elmina Castle, built by these Portuguese, you find a church built on top of dungeons. You go to the Cape Coast Castle, the British did the same thing. Church of England is built on top of a dungeon there too. Later, when the Danes regained control over the castle, they decided to convert this space from a church to an officiating room. Anytime slave masters wanted to marry locals or even some of the slaves, this was when they were officiating the weddings. Whenever they gave birth, they used the same space for naming ceremonies. Eventually, when their kids started to grow, they used the same space as a school to educate the Molanto kids as well. This is Osaje for Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, one of the key men that helped Ghana gain independence in 1957. He was Prime Minister all the way to 1960 and President 1960 to 1966. To date, arguably our best president. And this is Asimeni. Asimeni is the only Ghanaian who served as governor in this particular castle. He's from Akomufie, and Akomufie is around Akostombo in the eastern part of Ghana. Now, he gathered 80 men from his hometown. He led the 80 men into the castle where they pretended to be traders looking to buy guns from the Danes. When they came, they told the Danes they wanted to buy guns from them. But before paying for the guns, they wanted to try it out first. As soon as the Danes gave the guns to Asimeni and the 80 men for them to try, they used those same guns to kill the Danes, then to control over the castle in 1693. One of the Danes, however, managed to escape, and that was the Danish governor at the time. Surprisingly, the governor was just 25 years. He escaped by jumping the wall right behind the castle into the sea. Even though he sustained injuries, he managed to swim all the way to Asher Fort. It was the Dutch that were stationed at Asher Fort that took the Danish governor in, treated him of his injuries, and later took him to Denmark to report to their king that the Ghanaian and his men had conquered and taken control over their castle. After the Danish governor fled, he decided to put on the Danish governor's gown and then declared himself governor in 1693. He didn't rule for long. Just a year and 2 months later, the Danes actually came back. Surprisingly, they didn't come to fight. They came to persuade him to sell the castle back to them. He agreed and sold the castle back to the Danes for 50 marks of gold. Before leaving the castle, he decided to lock up the whole place and left with the original set of keys to his hometown in Akomufie as trophy. Till date, the original set of keys to the castle is still in his hometown. And till date, he remains the only Ghanaian to have served as governor in this particular castle. So for 364 years now, since the castle was built till now, he is the only Ghanaian who managed to become governor. And it wasn't just this castle. All the castles that we have in Ghana, there wasn't a single time a Ghanaian managed to become governor, except this very man in this particular castle, 1693 to 1694, a year and 2 months.
How can this is not in our textbook?
Yeah, so the main reason why is, I think the only place that you are likely to hear about him is either in the castle or in his hometown. The main reason is that when he became governor, he actually continued slave trade. Even though he's Ghanaian, when he became governor, he continued the slave trade. All the activities that the Danes were engaging in before he took control over the castle, he continued every single one of those activities. He was doing the normal trading activities. He was engaging in slave trade, buying and selling of slaves. Again, he was taking taxes from the locals as well. So, yeah. So these are the materials that the Danes used to build the castle: stones and lime as binding agents. So these stones were brought in from Labadi. The rest of the stones were brought in from Denmark, and that's what they used to build the whole castle. 364 years, and it's still standing strong. The side of the castle that we have toured so far is the old castle. Every single part of this side was built before independence. Then after independence, our first president was Sergeant for Dr. Kwame Nkrumah at the new castle. This is the new castle. Right from here all the way to the extreme end is the new castle. The new castle was built so that the president could get their offices, vice president, ministers. All those offices used to be here. It was moved to the Jubilee House February 2013. The first office at the top over there, that is the exact office the president occupied. Between 1957 to 2013, we had 12 presidents and military rulers. Out of the 12, 11 of them used the office over there. Just one president chose not to Yes, so this is the office of Ghana's longest serving president, the late Flight Lieutenant Jerry John Rawlings, popularly known as J.J. Rawlings. Rawlings served in the military, the only military man in Ghana to organize 3 coups. His first attempt, May 1979. Unfortunately, he failed with his first attempt. He was arrested and imprisoned at Ashford. Whilst he was in prison, he was planning his next attempt. As soon as his men managed to rescue him, just a few days later, he succeeded with his second attempt. He ruled for a total of 105 days, stabilized the country, decided to step aside for us to have the election. The election was won by Dr. Hilary Mann. 2 years into Hilary Mann's reign, Rawlings again decided to overthrow Dr. Hilary Mann because he felt there was a lot of corruption in the country at the time. Right from 1981 all the way to 1992, a period of 11 years, Rawlings was a military ruler in Ghana. He continued 8 more years as a democratically elected president. He served 19 years total. Till date, our longest serving president. So this was his office. Rawlings is half Scottish and half Ghanaian. His dad was from Scotland, his mom a Ghanaian from the Volta region. Unfortunately, he died 2020 during the COVID era. So that same year, he actually lost his mom as well. Coincidentally, just 2 days ago, his wife also passed on as well. May your souls rest in peace. Is the spiral walkway. This is where the slaves were counted before they were taken away. So they have designed the stairs so narrow so that just one slave could move at a time to make the counting very easy for them. So once the ship arrives, the ship will be about 300 meters away from shore. They will match slaves from the dungeons. They count them as they go down. They move them through the door of no return. They use small boats to convey the slaves to the ship. Then the ship will take the slaves away to the Virgin Islands to work on sugarcane plantations. So let's go and see the door of no return. That's right.
Budget of a panic. I get to last week and I'm a bit more. And I want my guys.
Return. It's known as a door of no return because once you are a slave and you are brought out, you cannot go back. So as I said earlier, when the ship arrives, they move them through this door, still in chains. They use small boats to convey them to the ship. Then the ship will take the slaves away to the Virgin Islands. Now, even though this has always been known as the door of no return, it is now also known as the door of return. In 1998, Ghana joined the Emancipation Day celebrations. The symbolic thing is that the mortal remains of 2 African Americans, one lady Crystal from Jamaica and one Samuel Carson from New York, were brought back to the Pretoria International Airport. They went by road to Port Amsterdam. They put the mortal remains on a boat and sailed all the way to the Cape Coast Castle. They moved the mortal remains through the door of no return at the Cape Coast Castle to break the chains of slavery, thereby making it the door of return, signaling the return of the slaves that were taken away a few years earlier. Now, before we exited the door of no return, there was a brown door to the left before we came out. It's a door that covers a tunnel. It's known as the Richter Tunnel. Now, Richter was a private slave trader. He was from Denmark, but he was married to a local. He built his house in the Osu community where he used to keep slaves. He was so rich and so powerful that at the point he became governor of the castle. 1803, slave trade was officially abolished. You could no longer transport slaves outside the country. Because of how lucrative it was, people wanted to continue illegally transporting slaves. Richter happens to be one of such people. He dug a tunnel straight from his house to the door of no return so that he could continue illegally smuggling out slaves. And that's the tunnel you see right before you exit the door of no return. So the house is still in the Osu community, very popular house. It's known as the Richter House. His descendants are still there. The middle part of the tunnel was blocked when this became the seat of government, obviously for security reasons. But this side of the tunnel is here. The other side leading to the house is also still there as well. All right, so we have just the castle garden left to end our tour.
Hello. Hello.
That's the castle garden. Now, before this was converted to a garden, it used to be the home of the Usu Alata people. The Usu Alata people are believed to have migrated from Nigeria. This is where they settled when they came. They built their houses to occupy this whole space. Their chief sold the land to the Danes for them to build a castle in 1661. In 1850, the castle was sold to the British. It didn't take long for the British to start having issues with the locals. It was all because of taxes. The British implemented poll tax ordinance. They were demanding taxes from the people in Jamestown, Osu, and Teshi. The people obviously refused to pay. The Osu people particularly felt they were the custodians of the land. It became a fight between them and the British. Anytime the British came down to take taxes from them, they would throw stones at the British. The constant stone throwing made the British very angry. In 1854, they used one of their warships, known as HMS Scorch, to bombard the people of Osu. They killed quite a number of them and destroyed the houses. The rest of them moved away, and that's when the British converted the space to a garden to serve as barrier between themselves and the people of Osu. So this happened 13 September 1854. Just last month, on 13 September, marked exactly 171 years since the incident happened as well. All right, so if there are any questions, you can ask. If not,